Hello, everyone, and welcome to Piloting the Future, a brand new podcast brought to you by Energy Central. Here on Piloting the Future, we're going deep with the leaders, innovators, and forward thinkers responsible for not just imagining where our power future is headed, but building it day by day. In each episode, we'll go beyond the headlines to hear from industry insiders and bold, game-changing innovators to separate the hype from reality. Since this is our first episode, we wanted to give you a little more intel on what to expect. But first, who are we? Well, I'm Kim Getgen, CEO of Innovation Force. And at Innovation Force, we're reimagining how innovation can take place across the entire energy industry. And I'm joined by my co-captain, Lee Krevat. Lee, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thanks, Kim. I'm Lee Krevat, CEO of Krevat Energy Innovations, where I advise over a dozen climate tech startups, and I also host the Climate Champions podcast. I started my career as a computer architect in Silicon Valley, then moved to San Diego, where I founded the outstanding and award-winning Smart Grid team at San Diego Gas and Electric. And I also launched the distributed renewable program at Semper Renewables.
So Lee and I, we go way back, but we found our conversations kept coming back to the one same big idea, which was innovation. And what does it take to be truly innovative in the power industry? And how do we put all of these innovative ideas into action? Who are the people, companies, and thought leaders really making innovation a priority? And that's what we'll be talking about on Piloting the Future every other week right here on the Energy Central podcast feed. From soaring demand to grid modernization to the electrification of everything, we're going beyond the headlines, speaking with some of the brightest minds in the energy industry to understand how utilities will work to deliver resilient and affordable power in this time of unprecedented change.
We promise you this: great, insightful, and transparent conversations, bold predictions about what the future holds, and intel on breakthrough technologies from truth tellers and entrepreneurial leaders who aren't just talking about change, they're leading it. This is your invitation into the cockpit to see the adoption of new ideas shaping our new energy future, one pilot, one success story at a time.
So we'll have new episodes out twice a month on Thursdays here on the Energy Central feed. Make sure you're subscribed and check out Energy Central for more of the headlines, conversations, and big ideas shaping the future of the power industry. Now, let's roll out our very first interview. Fasten your seatbelts and get ready for departure with today's powerhouse guest from Portland General Electric, Allegra Hodges, Head of Strategic Innovation, and Larry Bekkedahl, Senior Vice President of Advanced Energy Delivery. At PGE, they're not just talking about innovation, they're doing it. This is the time where we're really going to get a chance to talk about how innovation is moving ideas to impact. We're going to help this industry learn some lessons so we can get beyond innovation fatigue. So, Lee, did you get a chance to look at that, the PG Impact Report?
I did. I thought it was very exciting. I wish other utilities were doing something similar, focusing an actual program around innovation. I love the analogy, phase zero or step zero being in the hangar. And I love that it starts with employee ideas. I think that's a great way to figure out what can be innovated upon. Utilities often have the best idea of what needs to change and how to make the company better. I love that the executives are the FAA in the model. That is so cool. Really enjoyed that. Oh, and that 50% of the innovations that they got into the hangar actually ended up with a go decision. I thought that was a phenomenal number. I would not have thought it would be that high.
Yeah. And so I know Allegra's got a lot of those great details, but why don't we start with Larry? Because Larry, how did this whole program get started? You know, how did you formalize it? Why did you think it was needed? How did you provide that safety cover for innovation at Portland and really push that urgent need for change, which I see so many other utilities right now struggling with? Like, how do you just get it off the ground and get it started and drive that transformation?
Great. Well, thank you, Kim. Thank you, Lee. Glad to be here with you both. You are those two energetic individuals that I think help us all to think differently and look differently at what we do every day. It really started, I got to go back to, I almost say pandemic days. Here we are all trying to be on video conferences and trying to think about it. And as you put it, Kim, the buzzword was coming out, innovation, and we got it, utilities need to be innovative. And so we participated with EPRI. EPRI was doing a study on utilities and innovation. And so we participated, and there were over a dozen different utilities from not only national, but international as well. And of those utilities, guess who was at the bottom when rated for innovation? That happened to be us. PGE was at the bottom.
I just can't believe that. Because when I talk to people, they're like, oh my gosh, Portland is like so innovative and they're always on that cutting edge. And so, yeah, it was shocking.
So sometimes
right?
you have to, realize where you are. And then think about what do you need to do different. And Kim, if you recall, we got introduced to something called collective genius. And, Dr. Linda Hill from Harvard brought us in and to say, how should we think differently? That innovation is truly a process. It's not some magical, whiz bang, some smart person gets in and says, boom, this is what we're going to do. It is a process. And that's really what we started on this journey, is to think about what are those hurdles we have to get over. And as you'll hear Allegra talk about the various stages of innovation. But it really was that got us to thinking that we need a process to do this. And it takes time. If you don't spend the time on it, how's it going to get done? And so we're always asking that question, how much time did you spend on it last week? And was it productive time? And you think about innovation ideas that come into utilities, just a flood of them. I mean, if you went to Distributech, Lee, I didn't make it this year, but I could bet there was just hundreds of new ideas on the floor. And you're having to think, which ones am I going to tackle? Which ones are of interest? How do I bring them back? And all 6 of these look the same. And oh, by the way, if the vendor comes and talks to you, and then they talk to me, and then they talk to Allegra, and within a utility, you might have 6 or 7 people talking to the same vendor. Well, that vendor is put in an awkward position, as well as all those individuals who are, I would say, I don't want to say wasting their time, but they're not all productively thinking in the same line. So if you have a way to ingest or take those positions into the hangar, and then solve it, think about it, and move it into what we call that go, no-go decision. But it's got to be strategically linked to your business. What are your business units wanting to do? What are you wanting to accomplish? And then actively push forward to make sure it becomes a reality instead of just an idea. Because we've all been, and you've heard me talk about Sisyphus and pushing the old rock up the hill. We've all been there. And, that's not a good place to be, because eventually the rock's going to roll down and you're going to start all over again. So, let's do a really good job of making it a actual process instead of just creative ideas that we're throwing against the wall. That's how we started. We feel good about it. We've come a long ways, and our last survey that we, participated in, we're now in the top, quartile, I should say top decile on most of those categories. So we feel like we've done a good job.
Allegra, Larry talked about the need for a process. Can you compare the process or lack of process that you used to use when you had these ideas, when you wanted to do innovation, to what you're doing now?
Yeah, I think that's the key, really, is we realized, in this first EPRI opportunity where we assessed our innovation management capability, that we were not where we wanted to be. But it wasn't because we lacked the energy to do this work, or that we lacked the vision of what might be possible. That existed across the business, and we've been doing that really since we became a company. It's really in our blood. So that wasn't the issue. But what we realized was that as more and more innovative ideas were coming through, and we had a bigger set to be tackling, we didn't have a process, as Larry said, to determine whether they were the ideas that we wanted to pursue, and if they were, how would we move those forward quickly? So it was that innovation management capability that we were really lacking. And as we built our innovation strategy, that's where we focused. We knew we needed to get greater visibility to what all was going on, so it wasn't just hidden in corners of the business, where people had done a demonstration, but then written a report and it sat on the shelf. Officers needed to know where we stood across the portfolio of what we were investing time and energy in. And we also needed to increase the speed with which we were making decisions. So our previous approach, I wouldn't call it a process, was to approach all of these in more of an ad hoc way. An opportunity would come in, we would evaluate it in a corner of the business, maybe make a decision to move forward, maybe not. If folks left the business in between when it started and when it ended, things might fall through the cracks. So we were losing that visibility, that accountability, and in some cases, losing track of it altogether in terms of where it landed. But with this process that we've now put in place, it's simple. It's certainly not complicated, and that's what makes it work, I think, is having it be simple. But it provides people who go through the process value add. They're coming to it because they're running into hurdles, as Larry mentioned. We've identified what those hurdles are, where they are the most squirrely, where people get stuck, the most in trying to navigate innovation. And we've started to work to dismantle those hurdles so that things move faster. They feel like they're getting to decisions faster, and we're standardized in how we approach whether something is valuable or not. And having that standard approach to lean on has been incredibly helpful to everyone when it comes to moving innovation faster. It's not just the folks who are trying to move a new idea forward, but it's also the officers who can now see what's happening much more clearly and be confident that the decisions that are being made to move something forward are based on a standard approach, standard rubric of value, of benefits and risks are all being considered, and the right people are coming to the table. So I think it's those big things that are different for us now. It's things that you might think are, a no-brainer. Of course we want the right people at the table. Of course we want things to move faster. But until you have that structured standard process that everybody has agreed is how you're going to go about making these decisions, then you're kind of left doing it in an ad hoc way. And we've discovered that didn't work for us.
Yeah, you used the word swirly, and what came into my mind, the picture I saw was like a tornado, and not having air traffic control, letting you know about it and flying right into it instead of having a process for how to avoid issues like that.
Absolutely. And you mentioned air traffic control. I think that was a really big benefit to us, is being able to describe it in a way that people understood. We use this analogy because it's something that most people have a sense of how it works. They know how, if an idea is a potential plane, they know that it could come in and be in the hangar for a bit while we figure out whether it's something we want to pursue or not. But when it's really ready to move into the air, you have to go through some pretty important but standard steps to make sure it's ready to fly. So going through each of those steps is something that people could understand. And I think you reminded me that it's an important point to note that we, as the strategic innovation group, are not owning all of these ideas. We are the ones that facilitate ensuring that we can see the whole sky, that all the test flights that we pursue are getting to their destination as we intend them to. They're not crossing paths. We're not duplicating efforts. But it's really the SMEs who own these ideas, and they are the captains of each of these test flights that we put through the process. And having that ownership exist in the business is really critical to making this happen. If you don't have those experts being the ones to weigh in on whether it's worth moving something forward or not, or worth making a go recommendation versus a no-go, then innovation exists in a corner of the business that is discounted. And we really wanted to make it central to how we make decisions about what to scale and have it be very built into the day-to-day business that people do.
Any surprises, Allegra, or aha moments?
Yeah, I think, Kim, you may remember this at the very beginning of when we had launched our process. We had a captain who had approached us having felt like he had just run into wall after wall after wall of trying to understand how to get a small demonstration about whether or not augmented reality, virtual reality goggles were going to work for him and his team as a technical training manager. He had this hypothesis that it could be game changing for the work that he does to bring that type of technology into PGE and leverage it for to be able to do the work that they're doing in training and out in the field. But he needed to test it in just a small way, and he kept running into challenges about getting that approved and knowing even who to go to. So coming to us through the process, he breathed just this audible, huge sigh of relief in saying, oh, finally, you can help me figure out how to get this tested. And we were able to take him through just the steps. We had templates for him. We knew exactly who to go to at every stage to get things signed off for this small demonstration. And ultimately, that technology was very promising. The software that we were using wasn't able to connect in these remote areas that it was needed to. But having done that in a 3-month period and get those learnings to carry forward was hugely valuable to him. And he came to us after the fact and said, I will speak on your behalf in whatever venue you would like, because that made my life so much easier, and I can't imagine trying to have gone through that without you. So thank you. And I think that was one of the first times that I had my eyes opened about what value we can bring to the business. It wasn't about making people come through the process because it's the right thing to do. It was about bringing value to them. How can we make their lives easier? How can we make these things that they're trying to do, the vision that they have, come to life? So that was certainly an aha moment for me.
I love the way that you use the term captain, because it could have been the term employee or person with the idea, but it really shows the ownership associated with an idea when you use that word captain. Also, I just had an aha moment, and that is that it really, by using this process, it really frees up innovators to innovate. So they don't have to focus on all the steps they specifically have to do or reinventing a wheel. It's all laid out for them. They can just focus on what specifically is getting them excited.
Exactly. You nailed it.
Kim, you want to ask a question?
Yeah. I guess Larry, from your seat, and I like this air traffic control analogy. I like to say that you had to provide a lot of air cover for this. And in my seat, I have to talk to a lot of leaders who have maybe felt like their innovation program didn't succeed. I mean, if you look at the stats, depending on what stats you want to believe, 80% of digital transformation fails. I've done crazy research of my own to say that I think that we have $1 trillion of untapped value globally when we don't have a process we're seeing this succeed. One of the key differentiators from the people who are able to pull it off versus those that don't, it always comes down to leadership. And you being the leader at Portland General Electric and being able to provide that air cover for those of us that were, in the trenches, on the runways, back in those planes out of the hangar. I just wanted to get more of your perspective of what it was like as a leader. What did your conversations look like at the C-suite? What did it look like at the board level? How did you get your peers, involved in some of this? And some may have come willingly and others may not have. They might have had a lot of questions or concerns like, hey, is this encroaching on my turf versus somebody else's turf? And so I see these political obstacles and the leadership obstacles quite a bit. And I'm wondering if you could just share maybe with your peers at your level, like what it took to get it done and how you've been able to provide that air cover for your team to be successful.
No, Kim, you're hitting on a whole bunch of critical issues that really do take time and effort and building consensus. We had a clear message from our board that said, if you're not innovating, you're dying. And so you need to be out in front. You need to be pushing the innovation. So I think it starts with that kind of foundation to have a board that says you need to be innovating. You need to be, growing. And I bet you if you surveyed 99% of the utilities boards, they'd say the same thing. So how do we act on that becomes the question then. And I think Allegra was hitting on quite a few things. I'll just say she makes it really easy. If you have, the data and the information to say, okay, your target was 90 days, but you're on average at 130 days. Here's where, you're slowing down and speeding up. Oh, here's the projects that went through. Here's the projects that didn't. You're able to provide that sort of information to your peers and back to your board to say, okay, we've been running this. Here's the flights that have come through, and here's results. Here's the ones that are left in the hangar. We didn't even get them off the ground because, wasn't of interest. But being able to have that information at your fingertips and to be able to share those stories really makes a big difference. Otherwise, it's kind of hearsay. It's kind of, well, did that really happen? How long is it taking you? You don't have solid information that you can present and say, hey, we're always getting hung up in this department. And if it's always hanging up in that department, then I'm having that conversation with that counterpart and saying, look, we need to move these along. How can we do that in a better way? And do we need to have a sit down and talk with those individuals quickly? Because the fun thing about the process is you and your part aren't being held to 6 weeks of grueling effort. It's usually an hour or two that you need to produce in a couple of days, and it moves on to the next step. So, giving people, here's that assignment, here's what's needed, the direction, and they can ask the questions, hey, what's the status of this thing? And they get a quick answer to say, here's the status of it. So I would just say process provided a lot of data that then becomes a story. And that story then leads to the next idea and, the next opportunity.
Here's a question for both of you. Do you have a favorite test flight or a favorite insight from the program? Allegra?
Oh, there's so many. It's hard to pick a favorite. I think one that was really memorable because it embodies the spirit of coming together to collaborate and speed up quick tests of new technology for customers is one that comes to mind around a resiliency team had come to one of our early engagement opportunities that we call Spark Tank with this need that they'd identified for customers who live in public safety power shutoff zones. So in our service area, in high fire risk areas and in high fire risk weather, may make the decision to enact a PSPS event, a public safety power shutoff event, to prevent wildfire from potentially igniting in high risk weather events. And when that decision is made, it can be a hard decision because it impacts customers who wouldn't have power during that time. And for customers in rural areas, especially who may be on well water, it's particularly impactful for them because in that case, their well pumps would not be working either. So they would be out of power and of water. So this resiliency team came to us at Spark Tank and said, we are really looking to solve this for customers or provide options for them to lessen the impact, the negative impact that a PSPS event would have. And we need help because we have some ideas, but we don't have engineering support who can really speak to how these systems work and help us really do a quick test of what might be a solution or a set of solutions for customers. And through that Spark Tank, there was an engineer who said, oh, actually, I have a system very similar to this, and I would be absolutely willing to help you figure out what might be possible for customers in this type of situation. And it led to a really short but really impactful collaboration between that engineer and the resilience team to find a number of options that might work, including some low-cost, readily accessible options that the resilience team hadn't even thought of. They were thinking like, well, maybe batteries would work. But there's a whole lot of other options out there. And through this collaboration and leaning on the stepwise standard process, they were able to come up with a menu of options pretty quickly, and now are standing up kind of a customer hub on our website to help customers navigate what potential solutions may be out there for that type of event. And that's something that's, it's just so impactful for us to see as innovation facilitators, to see people coming together to solve problems quickly and lean on the process to make good decisions. And also something that is, immediately leading to potential benefit for customers, because we're always on the lookout for that. And if we're not keeping an eye out towards potential solutions and finding a way to test for whether they'll be useful or not, we're not showing up in the best way possible. And so what I love about this process is that it brings people together to do this in ways that are quick, they're strategically aligned, and they're really providing value for customers as soon as we can make that happen.
And Larry, do you have a highlight to share?
I do, Lee. And I love the wildfire has given us lots of opportunities, whether it's pano cameras or, the analytics behind it, et cetera. The aha moment for me most recently is that when we consider AI, and, everybody's got their own bots they're thinking about, and there's a zillion of them out there, right? And the notion that AI, much like we're talking hardware, new innovative pieces of equipment, et cetera, AI kind of falls into that same category. So, okay, what's the idea? There's a million of them out there. Are you going to build it in-house, or are you going to go and purchase it from some third party? And how are you going to deploy it? Does it meet all your cybersecurity needs? Does it meet it has all the same makings. And so for us, recently driving to, okay, let's take those AI bots through the same exercise of any of our other innovation and walk him through that. That's not normal for a lot of utilities. IT is over here doing their thing. OT is over here doing their thing. This is technology that needs to come together. And so for me, we've made some huge strides in that area to bring those together and to think about innovation. How do we deploy that? That's been a lot of fun. Sure, we built a chat, PGE. So we have our own internal, and that's used for lots of different departments. But we also things like design reviews, scanning designs, having them, and the fun thing that Allegra and team, I think, came out of that with was man versus machine. To have a work group, have a competition between themselves and say, does this work or doesn't it work? And in this case, the man beat the machine, which was cool. But it was a real eye-opener, I think, for everybody to think differently about the work they have, the tools they have. And so I'll just throw that out there. AI can fit into the same innovation muscle.
I would like to ask a follow-up to that. You talk about AI, and at the same time, you talk about employees sponsoring and captaining these innovations. Some of these AI bots are going to reduce the need for an employee. So how do you deal with employees wanting to be innovative, but not wanting to put themselves out of a job? Because a lot of times the person doing the job is the person that can see how to innovate around it.
I guess, Lee, the way I would answer it is augmented reality, if you will. It's augmented their job and their position. So these routine, mundane, I hesitate to say routine because they tend to be take a lot of time and effort. You're tracking down data from lots of different places. You're having to manually put stuff together, et cetera. So when you automate all of that, that frees them up to go do other things. And so we can apply them. One of the first things that most utilities cut is innovation, R&D. All right. So if you're doing this, how do you free up more people to do more of this? That's the way I look at it. And it kind of breeds on itself, but I would say the employees that get involved in it, they love it. They like seeing how, take that routine piece out of my job. Let's get on to the stuff that customers really want.
Yeah, I would totally agree. We had one just come through the other day to propose adjusting a current bot that we have to do some different tasks related to procurement request reviews. And it's these types of requests are, in their own words, the things that take the supply chain professionals away from the true work that they were hired to do. It's pretty mundane checklist items to make sure that any given request that comes in meets all of the policy requirements that we have. Very important work. We need to be doing it. And it takes time away from the things that they could be spending in terms of the time that they could be spending to negotiate better deals with vendors or, more complex work that they're really trained for suffers because they need to do the checklist items that we're trying to see if a bot could do and free up time for them to be able to do the other things. So it's those types of opportunities that I think people are really coming to the table to test out. And in some cases, they may work the way we had hoped. That's our hypothesis, and that's why we go through these test flights with very clear test plans to understand whether a given solution meets the objectives that we set. Sometimes they don't, but without trying it, we spend a lot of time spinning, thinking about, is it worth doing this or is it not? And if you don't have the data to speak to whether it's worth it, you can't make an informed decision, and you certainly can't make a quick decision about it. But it's really the people who are coming with these opportunities to develop a solution that can allow them to do the more important work, the work that they're really trained for that's more complex.
Now, you two are obviously very passionate about innovation, and you see the value. And when I worked for San Diego Gas and Electric, way back when, I was very passionate about it, and my CEO was really passionate about it, and our COO was really passionate about it, and we made a lot of progress. And then that CEO and COO were promoted and retired. New people came in that didn't have the same vision. This one CEO, I won't mention his name, banned innovation because he wanted to focus on the bottom line. And for some reason, he didn't put those two together. How can you ensure that when you move on to other better things, Portland still continues with innovation?
I think this is about the storytelling that Larry was speaking to earlier, that if you have all of these separate use cases and you've collected data on all of them to tell the story of how fast we can move, where it made a difference in the business, you are collecting data on the back end of any use case to speak to the day in the life of what the experience of using this new technology was. And then you can show how that carries forward for the learnings that you did in a test flight to what decisions can be made at scale in a much more informed way. Aggregating that all is hugely important. And what I think Larry and I have been really working to do is make sure that innovation gets tied directly to those downstream decisions and the execution of the core business. How can we leverage what we're learning in innovation to speak to decisions that need to be made at scale and save us time, save us risk, make sure that we're doing the risk mitigation by engaging these test flights up front. That, I think, is the language that speaks to decision makers across time, that if you can tell the story of success in that way, you can better ensure longevity of a robust innovation program.
Lee, if I could add just a little, Allegra spot on with the storytelling. We are all really going to be challenged this next year or so. I don't know how long it goes on, but lots of questions about almost recession period here that we're facing, and so I can see where right now people are not thinking R&D, they're not thinking innovation, but if it's going to help and move the bottom line, you've got to move there quickly. And I think the only way you get there quickly is to have a process that gets you through each of those steps. So, yes, we can go back to our old bad habits and stop doing those things and then rely on others. Hopefully they'll do it and then we'll learn from them. But I think really all of our utilities are unique. The situations we're in are unique. And in fact, I think our customers deserve that, us to do something different.
Yeah, so let's move this now from, one utility, Portland General Electric, to the entire industry. So let's think about, what we're champion or could champion now as you all went from lagging to leading. How do you see innovation being able to be driven across the industry or across ecosystems? And I really wanted to ask y'all this perspective because you are involved and, like you were bringing up EPRI quite a bit, but, you're involved in Energy Impact Partners, you're involved in Incubate Energy Labs. Like you do a lot of the hard work in the industry to push receptivity for some of these newer ideas. And Allegra, you touched greatly on reducing risk. Can we get your perspective on how you are seeing innovation industry-wide? What are the benefits of ecosystem innovation? And if you could tie in any real concrete benefits like reduced risk or cost, I'd love to hear more about that as well.
Well, maybe, Kim, I'll start and I'll hand it to Allegra, is that we as an industry do communicate with each other. That's the good news side. And so a lot of industries, are going to be just, fighting. You're always in competition. And we haven't had the need to act that way. There was a lot of, I'll go back to the 90s, early 2000s, deregulation was being put in, and that split apart what the distribution does, the transmission, the generation. And what I would say is that this complex machine, the most complex machine in the last century that we all built, was starting to get split up into parts and pieces, and you couldn't optimize the machine. And so people are finding, we got these barriers in between of us, and how do we start to solve those barriers between and start to think holistically? You mentioned batteries. They're a great example. Is that a generating device? Is that a transmission device? Is that a distribution device? What is it? It's all of the above. And if you can't use it as an all of the above, then you're limiting what the opportunity is with that device. So we're learning from each other. There's a really critical time in our industry where, like you say, the digital side is coming with the electrons, and how we design, put the pieces together, and make the system work, optimize it, and make it really affordable. Something that customers can participate with, that they feel like they have control of that energy that they're using, and they understand it. So lots of opportunities here. We're seeing it worldwide. And if we're just thinking about our own little utility, we're missing the point. We need to be able to look broader and bring that to our customers locally. Allegra, what's your thoughts on? You're seeing it on the ground with the innovators across the nation.
Yeah, I think as you mentioned, the collaboration amongst utilities is a real unique benefit that our industry has that not many do. And I love to see that we lean on our peers to learn from them as much as possible. My view is that I think we just need to be doing that a lot more. We can't be all kind of ready to be the second to adopt a new technology after someone else has tried it first. But we do need to be really willing to step out there and test in a small way when we can, and then also to incorporate the learnings from others as we see those happening. I think, Kim, as you mentioned, things like Incubate Energy Labs, that's a great venue for utilities to come together and identify mutually beneficial objectives that we can test and kind of all extract learnings from simultaneously, even if we're not the one hosting it on our system. So those types of things I think are really important. And the more we can do that in a repeatable, practiced way, the better off the industry will be. I think I see willingness to do that all around me. You know, the captains across the board at PGE are all very interested in what others are doing, and it's worth documenting what's different about our system versus where, you know, something has been tested before. But we shouldn't let it stop us from making an informed decision about what to do next and how to carry forward those lessons into what we might want to test. So I think it's getting more comfortable with that is really a key part of moving the industry faster. So I would very much continue to be showing up, you know, singing that song, and that's what we do in all of these venues.
I was going to ask a quick follow-up, but also bring Lee in because Lee works with a lot of startups these days. I want to know, you know, what do you think is holding us back? And especially Lee, maybe you could bring in a little bit more of that startup perspective. But when I heard Larry talk a little bit about, you know, the economic times we're in, I thought of 3 startups right away that have been in Incubate Energy Labs that could offer utilities today a huge OpEx savings. Like, no kidding, but yeah, they would be considered innovation. And if we had that CEO you had mentioned that killed all good, you know, killed the innovation program, we'd be missing out. So what is holding utilities back and how do we move forward more into this kind of transformation? Feel free to represent the utility or the startup side. Like, what do we need to do differently?
I'll tell you one quick story, very recent. The California Public Utilities Commission just proposed a decision. It hasn't even been voted out yet. That with regards to meter socket adapters, that instead of every IOU having to test it themselves, and that's a big ask of the startup because they have to give every utility a lot of samples, then they have to wait for every utility to do every test. Instead of that, the CPUC said that the IOUs could and should work together to decide who's going to test what and to leverage each other's testing. And I would love to hear if there are ideas about how to do that more industry-wide, this ability to share results.
Well, that's a great one. Lee has bring up the UL, the liability associated with how do you have the confidence? And that's what we've relied on. We've relied on UL, that testing. But you're right. Why does every utility have to go through the same testing? If that device can be brought forward with those stamps on it, why shouldn't it move forward? It should be much faster. Kim, as you bring up, you know, again, there's lots of OpEx out there. There's lots of opportunity. And well, I think you also, what was the term you used that we got saturation or we're at the
Fatigue.
Yeah, well, if you've got so many coming at you, how do you avoid that fatigue? Because, you know, just as Lee's bringing it up, you know, hey, here's 4 more good ideas that you need to, you know, be able to take a look at. So, boy, again, your strategic direction, is it fitting in with that? And, you know, again, do you have a process that you can clear those pretty quickly? Because we all know that, I hate to say it, there's some snake oil out there. There's some ideas that just, you know, somebody's trying to find a problem for a device that they put together. How do we weed through that quickly? But yet you might be able to even adapt it or change it for and help that startup get off on the right start too. So I don't want to downplay it, but fatigue is there. We've got to, you know, be able to manage our way through and make sure that if you can prove the result of what you had planned for and execute on it, your next one's easier. And it's easier to sell that next one as well.
That's right. Innovation is a sales job, and we often forget that. And I guess what's holding us back around the fatigue can sometimes feel like, you know, did it measure up to what we thought it was going to do? And when you get too many of those snake oil type rumors out there, I think that is becoming a big an impact, holding utilities back, scared to go and try it the next time of like, is this really going to work for me or not? Hence the need for ecosystems, collaboration, the wisdom in crowds, and those utilities that are participating in so many of the groups that y'all participate in to really get the right, I think, the good news out on what's working, what's not working. But I hope that maybe some of these larger associations and member driven organizations where there are a lot of utilities working together innovatively can adopt this idea of like, why don't we just all use a standardized process and share the learning? So
I was just going to agree. I think that one of the simplest things that we can do as an industry is come to terms with it being okay to come to a no-go. We really try to incentivize learning rather than finding things that will scale. Of course, we have these hypotheses that there's value to be had in new technologies, and we want to test that as quickly as possible, aligned to strategic objectives. But we make it okay to have the answer be no, that it didn't work. And to lift that fear of failure, I think, off of people is a huge opportunity to unlock innovation and make quick decisions about what will work. Because once you've kind of let go of the baggage of, all the snake oil that might be out there, you really have the time and energy to spend on the things that have the most possibility, the highest likelihood of succeeding for you.
Let's move to a rapid fire round. Allegra, what's one thing involving innovation that people don't talk about, but they should?
How simple it is, I think. I mean, the lesson that we've taken from standing up this process is that it doesn't have to be, and it actually should not be complicated to identify potential value in new technology and take it through its paces to make a decision. The more complicated you make it, the higher the risk that you are going to lose people along the way. So the simpler you can have it be, so people understand it, that it doesn't feel like an entire extra set of paperwork that they have to do to be able to test new opportunities. That's what's going to get you to quicker decisions and have you be able to document your whole portfolio. So simplicity is great. Just follow the scientific process, try to make those test flights as small as you can make them to learn something valuable and then go on to the next step. So that's what I would say.
Test flights. I love it. Larry, what's the biggest challenge utilities are going to see over the next 5 years?
New large load. Data centers. That's the biggest, but the one that I love the most is probably batteries.
I'm with you on both of those. Kim, bust an innovation myth for us.
That I shouldn't get started because I don't have a team and I don't have a budget. Time is actually the biggest killer to your innovation program. So the longer you wait on an idea and let it die on the vine, that is actually the poison, because now nobody wants to get behind an idea ever again. And as Larry says, that rock will roll right back down over you and you're starting over. So I would say, don't wait for the perfect budget. Don't wait for the perfect team. You can get started on it today. And Portland's a great example of that. So Lee, I want to ask you, what is a grid innovation myth you'd like to bust?
I guess that utility employees don't want to or can't innovate. That is not it at all. There's a big difference in the utility industry. When Apple risks and innovates, they're going to make billions and billions of dollars if they're successful. And if they fail, it's expected that they fail, probably 4 out of 5 times in their innovations. In the utility industry, if you innovate and fail, it could result in a stranded asset. It could result in fire or an outage. So there's a lot more on the line when you innovate at a utility. And so utility needs its own process. And that's what I think, Portland General has been able to do. Very exciting.
Exactly. So I'll wrap this up, thank you so much to Allegra and Larry for joining us. I think this was a really great episode for everybody who's really thinking about how can you innovate in today's new economic climate. Get moving. If you found this conversation helpful or inspiring, share your own bold prediction with us. Tag Innovation Force on LinkedIn. Tell us about a new company that you think is changing the face of the energy industry. Who knows? They may be the next guest on this show. And if you're inspired by what you heard today from Portland, please check out their 2025 Innovation Impact Report. All you have to do is Google Portland General Electric Innovation, and you'll be able to find their webpage dedicated to their innovation program and their report. And of course, talk to me. I would love to offer you our Innovation Force Fast Track program, where we could, in a no cost, no obligation way, help you explore how your team can replicate the success that Portland drove ideas to outcomes faster. So with that, Lee, I think this one, we can fasten our seatbelts. I think we're coming in for a landing.
Get out there and innovate.
That's right. Thank you.